Hello, and welcome to another episode of Orlando the Komputerguy. And on today's episode, can this upscaler help improve the quality of the output from my consoles to my TV? Let's find out.
On the previous episode, I had help in organizing all my video game consoles. The project went well without any major hiccups. As you can see, all my video game consoles are in their place. You might notice a few changes since the last video. One, my Halo Xbox 360 has been replaced with a standard white one. My selector boxes have been moved from the side of the cabinet to the inside. That happened when I was woken up in the middle of the night when my top selector box fell and crashed to the floor. Finally, my GameCube is missing. Don't worry, someone is just borrowing it. The only thing I didn't like wasn't the project itself, but the video output.
You see, I'm used to having all my consoles hooked up to the TV using the RCA cables. And, well,
the TV just isn't really processing the low resolution signal very well. So to try and fix that problem, I decided to do some research and came across video upscalers. So what are upscalers? Well, there's a very good in-depth article about it on How-to-geek. I'll have a link to it in the description below. But in a nutshell, an upscaler takes the low resolution signal from, let's say, the NES, which outputs at 240p, and stretches the output to match the native resolution of the TV. My TV's native resolution is 720p. That translates to 1280 pixels horizontal by 720 pixels vertical. Now it can display 1080p resolution, which is 1920 pixels horizontal by 1080 pixels vertical, but my TV will scale it down to the 720p resolution. So every console generation has their own output, but for this segment we will look at the NES, which looks like this compared to the TV. 240p translates to 256 pixels horizontal by 240 pixels vertical, although the vertical output is only 224 pixels. So the TV has to stretch all those pixels out and scale it to its native 720p.
So the TV has a lot to do just to display the output from the consoles.
This device here does a lot of that grunt work. The box will take any RCA or S-video output from my consoles and upscales the video into either 720p or 1080p depending on what settings you decide to set it at. In my case, I'll set the upscaler to 720p and the box sends that signal out into the HDMI input on my TV. Now the television doesn't have to upscale anything. All it has to do is display an incoming signal that is already in its native resolution.
So now that we know how upscalers work, let's see how that translates into this TV. But first, let me show you how I have everything hooked up.
So I have all my consoles, well, at least the ones that use RCA anyway, hooked up behind here, and they go out this cable. Whenever I want to play a game from a certain machine, all I need to do is push the button that corresponds to that console. Since I have so many, I had to create a roadmap, so to speak. So let's say I wanted to play a game from the Sega Genesis. The TV would be set for AV. On the first box, I would push the second button. Then I would make sure the first button on the second box is selected. Confusing, I know. Then I should be able to load in a game and play it. So I'm not going to show every retro console's output, just one from each generation starting with the NES, just to get an idea of what the consoles look like through the AV output. Now let's hook this up instead. This should be straightforward, as all I have to do is unhook the RCA cables from the side of the TV and plug them into the Upscaler. Off camera, I have already hooked up an HDMI cable into the back of the TV that already runs down to where the selector boxes are. Now I should be able to attach the HDMI cable from the TV to the back of the Upscaler. Just plug in some power, plug in the RCA cables to the front, and it should start to send something to the TV. Once we switched it to the right input on the TV, let's go ahead and test this out with some Street Fighter on the Sega Genesis. Wow, that actually looks slightly better. Let's check out some of the other console outputs. For the RCA side, I have stretched them out slightly to match the Upscaler's native resolution.
Well, that was a fun and pretty inexpensive way of upgrading the output of my video game consoles to my TV. Though I did notice the colors were a bit off during the side-by-side comparison. That's something I didn't see when playing the games. I can live with that since I didn't notice that before. Now, I've heard how some upscalers introduce lag, but to be honest, on the one that I picked out, I didn't really notice any. I tested that with games from each console. As far as I can tell, the response time is actually pretty fast. But stay tuned, as I'm sure I'm not done with this project. There's always going to be talented people out there making these retro consoles playable on modern TVs. So if I find something better, I'll be sure to test it out. But that's going to be it for now. As always, thanks for watching. Bye bye.